Okay, I think I'll just go with the questions. So the first one, I think it was a yes with quite a lot of buts and ifs and ands. And one of the concerns was how something like this, the transition into a framework, into a regulatory framework from, you know, lots of different organizations that already have some quality assurance within their organization, you know, individuals who are doing CPD, some who are trained formally, some who are trained informally. How do you kind of transition all of that into this? I think there was quite a lot of discussion around that. But I think that the yes was to having a kind of overarching gauge for quality of practice for the sector. That was a big yes. And there were a few sightings of examples. For example, there was an example from Europe where you know, there's a register with local authorities once a year. You know, practitioners in the community would have to register once a year, and you know, you just come back yearly. It's kind of licensing arrangement. There were some examples from sign language. You know, if you want to be a sign language interpreter, you can only do that through a particular you know, sort of qualification or licensing system. There was a concern around whether this is something that should be done through organizations that already exist, or whether it should be something that individuals can do directly. And that was a big question. It was something that was repeated quite a lot. I think there was a sense that it's something that the entire, or many people in the dance sector need to be involved in. So it's not something that can kind of happen in a vacuum with a small group. There's a real we feel to it. If we get it right, it will be good. If not, it will be a nightmare. That was the sense. I do think there were still some big why questions about, you know, whether this is necessary. And I think it's good for us to register that there are still people who are asking, why do we need this at all? Whether it would be useful. Now, this was slightly more difficult because it was kind of useful to who? You know, useful to employers, useful to practitioners themselves. I think there was a sense that there is some value in it, but that it won't solve all our problems. So it's useful to employers and participants so that they can get a sense of quality across the board. It's a valuable way of benchmarking, and it's a starting point for recruitment. But quite a few people who actually are involved in recruiting dance teachers were saying that they're not going to recruit someone unless they can, you know, actually guarantee the quality of the experience, and that means bringing someone in to do a test session. So this framework is not going to do that for them, but it could be a good starting point for eliminating some people and including some people. One comment was that it's really useful in terms of ensuring that there's self-awareness within the sector and that people are serious about CPD. So it would be useful in that way. And of course, it could be valuable to advocate for dance in the broader sector or in sectors outside of dance. So for example, health and sports. There was a question around whether some things that already exist, like learning outside the classroom, you know, other you know, sort of initiatives have already covered some of the ground that this will cover. So there's still a little bit of doubt about whether whether you know, this is reinventing the wheel. And then what needs to be included? It must address the issue of groups and individuals. It could be a graded mark, such as the Arts Award, you know, kind of bronze, silver, gold. It needs to involve existing organizations in assigning whatever those grades would be, and it needs to be linked to CPD. It needs to have a sense of equality. It needs to be inexpensive. And then there was an example of something that's happening in the West Midlands where they're advocating for a dance broker who will actually build the relationships, will be the kind of link, the bridge between employers and practitioners. And there was a kind of question around whether this framework or whatever organization runs it could play that role of being a broker. So I think, I mean, I'm sure I haven't covered everything, but if there's anything, just shout.
Our group kind of came up with about 3 distilled points. They probably won't believe this, but they did. They can always challenge me. It's all right. First of all, it was felt that professional standards were more a professional standards framework was more relevant for us. Secondly, that marketing was extremely important, and that's not interestingly been mentioned in many of the others. There was a sense that actually this needs to be really clearly communicated to make it of value outside of the dance sector as well as within. And linked to that, the final point was that a one-stop shop would be useful for people to find out about dance teachers or in all different dance forms. So the fact that we have to go, or people external to the dance sector have to go to so many different sites and different places to find out is not helpful for us. That was the final point. And just one little final one to that as well. I thought it was interesting that international framework was mentioned, but that's probably further in the future because we're struggling enough to get to the point in this country first. So that was interesting, given that the travel of dancers and transition. And
that's you. Well, thank you all very much, and that's incredibly interesting and useful.